Hey everybody, welcome to a special Saturday episode of the Lesser Saints of Discord. Addie wanted to share their story. It's a serious subject, and we all figured, why not use a platform? I personally think it's important when you have a story and you want to share it, you should, because there may be other people going through similar things, and it's good to get stories out there.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for, allowing me to use the platform for this. So what we're going to be talking about is my experiences growing up in the family court system, in and out of foster care, talking to lawyers at a young age, seeing a counselor and a therapist, the cattiness on both sides, my parents versus my grandmother, and how they played me against each other, and what that does to a kid. So it might not be a fun one, but I hope you'll stick around to hear me out.
We might end up putting some cat or dog or pet videos in back just to keep things light.
Oh, by all means, by all means.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really know how to start.
The beginning's a good place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back in the beginning, the Big Bang happened.
So, in the beginning, as it were, I was born. Both of my parents were still in high school. My dad was 17 and my mom was 16. So my dad was one of those guys that was like, oh, the wrong tracks. He wasn't in like a gang or anything, but he hung out with people that like stole cars and graffitied and got into fights and drank underage and all that kind of stuff. Typical 80s party animal kind of guy. Mom was, not really straight A student, but she was, she wanted to make something out of herself. And mom came from money, dad came from the wrong side of the tracks. And so when I came into the picture, it became less about one side of the family being like, oh, he's a piece of crap and he's going to drag you down with him. And it became more than, all right, he needs to get his act together if you two are going to raise this child. And so doing so, my dad, who was way behind in his grades and was never going to graduate anywhere near when my mom was going to, decided to drop out and start working. So he started working at a garage. And he got a lot of work doing it because he worked on like weird cars like Mazdas and stuff back in the day that not a lot of people knew how to work on. So that kind of, he was able to make money off that. And mom stayed in school. So that went on for about 3 or 4 months, from what I'm told. Again, I was a newborn. I don't remember a whole lot of this. This is all retold by my parents and other family members. That went on for about like 3 or so months. And then my grandmother, who's not really my grandmother by blood, but we're just going to call her my grandmother. Really close friend of the family who's been with the family for generations. She stepped in and she was recently retired. She was in her late 60s and she had a lot of money. And she stepped in and said, look, you guys are having a hard time. It would be hard enough if it was just the two of you, But with a newborn child in the middle of this, and you guys are both kids yourselves, why don't you let me take care of Addie for a while, and you guys can focus on getting a house. Wendy can start working. You guys can pull your money together, and make a better life for your child. And so my parents, being kids, and looking at the rest of the family who have known my grandmother for, like I said, generations. She's always been like a surrogate mom to different generations of the family. She's always been there to help out, to give money, to she would always open her door if one of my aunts or uncles was having a hard time at home. They could come stay with her until things cooled off. So everyone's like, yeah, there's no reason not to trust her. This sounds like a good idea. So they signed custody of me over to my grandmother. Well, unbeknownst to anybody at the time, my grandmother was becoming kind of senile. And she had severe empty nest syndrome. And what my parents had signed without a lawyer present were, what is the term? Irrevocable custody rights of me.
Oh.
Yeah, basically she's my parents now. And because my mom was not of legal age to have signed that without one of her parents there, they were able to fight it. But you gotta remember, this is a retired woman in her late 60s with a lot of money and a lot of free time versus my struggling teenage parents with no money and no free time. So she had lawyers and money and time to read up on things and time to contact all kinds of professionals, while my parents were just struggling to make ends meet, while also stressing out that they accidentally gave me away. So this is where this all starts. I wasn't even a year old yet. So it went to trial. Well, there was a year-long legal battle, and then it ultimately went to trial. And during the trial, my grandmother had photos of me from when I had spent a weekend visitation with my parents, and there was a red mark on my hand, and like my whole palm and some of my fingers were red. And she presented that as evidence that I was burned. There was no medical evidence to back this up. I didn't go to the hospital. There was no medical records that could corroborate the story. But we think it's because she knew somebody in court or whatever. That was the linchpin in the whole proceeding, and my parents lost. What had actually happened was I was coloring with markers, and I put my hand down on the wet ink and covered my hand in red ink. And my parents just forgot to wash my hand off before they sent me home. So that was a thing. See, where do we go from there?
What happened next?
So the judge said, all right, custody goes to Virginia, which is my grandmother's name, or Ginny, as everyone called her. I called her Nanny. But custody went to my grandmother. But the judge said, you guys genuinely care about this child, so I'm not going to condemn you to never be able to have your child back, but you're going to have to prove to us that you're suitable parents. So, therein commenced years and years of of more custody battles and trying to prove to Child Protective Services that they could take care of me and provide like a wholesome environment for me to grow up in. But they were poor. We were in what's called Section 8 housing at the time. My parents were both on food stamps. My dad's family was like, fuck this and all your nonsense, and just abandoned my dad to do this without the support of his family. And my mom's family were trying to help because my mom, again, came from money, but they couldn't get past how much they hated my dad. So they were very wishy-washy in how much they would help. So they were struggling to make ends meet while paying lawyer fees and trying to take time off of work to go see like professionals and consultants and things, and going to like meetings with Child Protective Services and joint therapy sessions between my grandmother, me, and my parents. Well, this was later on when I was a little bit older, but yeah, it was just a nightmare for my family. And amidst all this, mind you, I'm living full time with my grandmother. I'm beginning to become aware of things. Like I don't just mean like I can tell what's going on. I mean like I'm beginning to understand that there's a world around me. Like I'm a toddler now. I'm not an infant. I'm beginning to like speak and like learn what mom and dad is. But when you grow up as like a little baby and you're not with your parents, I think like a lot of people think they know what that must be like. But imagine, like, I like to put it this way. When you're a kid and you're scared of a movie, like there's a monster in a scary movie that you're watching, and like your mom or dad are like watching it with you, and they're like, don't worry, it's just a movie. That's not real. Like monsters aren't real. That's not what it's like in real life. That was explained to me at an early age, but I was also watching like family sitcoms like Family Matters and Full House and stuff like that, and shows where there was a mom and a dad and kids all in one house together, and I lumped that in with things that I thought were just on television or just in movies. I thought that a child living with their mom and dad was like Hollywood bullshit. I genuinely thought that for like the first 11 years of my life. Because that wasn't the experience I had. I lived with my grandmother and my godfather. To me, my parents were these poor people that my grandmother would dump me off with on the weekends. And I would be miserable because she would fill my head with all these stories about how evil they were, and no matter what they say, they don't really care about you. They're just trying to take you away from me because the government will give them money if they have more kids. She was horrible. She was absolutely horrible, and she turned me against my family before I even knew who they were. She would tell me to lie to the counselors. She would like bribe me with toys and like Nintendo games if I would tell the counselors that like, oh yeah, like I went over to my parents' house this weekend and my dad beat me with a fucking pool stick or something like that. And then that would be another situation that I didn't realize I was building for myself to drag me and my parents and my grandmother back into the courtroom. And it's horrible because I was being used as leverage against my parents, and I didn't even understand what was going on. And like when you're a kid, like a little kid. Like, you want to do whatever makes like your mom or your dad happy because they're your whole world. Well, my mom and my dad were my grandmother. My mom and my dad were weird strangers to me. So I did whatever my grandmother, like the toys and the bribing aside, I did whatever my grandmother wanted me to because she was my whole world. And my parents, well, my dad, that's a story for like another time. But at the time, my parents generally were good people, and I was being horrible to them without even realizing. And to this day, I've still not forgiven, even though they have, I've still never forgiven myself for that. That's fucked me up well into my 30s. The horrible lies that I said about my parents to lawyers, to the judge, to therapists, in order to make my grandmother happy. In order to help my grandmother tear my family apart. And to do that to a small child is just, it's just evil. It's horrible.
Yeah. Doing all right?
Yeah.
Not an easy subject to talk about, obviously.
Yeah.
Can we get some love in the chat for Addie?
I'm alright, guys. It's like, this is one of those things that, like, it's hard to talk about, but I really want to talk about it, so I'm not gonna stop until I'm done. But,
Well, if you'd like a break, I could talk a little bit about my experiences with the foster care system.
Oh my god, yeah, sure. Actually, yeah, give me a breather.
So I don't have any personal, direct knowledge of the foster care system. But, so, right now, my immediate family, I have my mom and dad, who are my biological parents. I've never been adopted, nor has my sister or anything like that. However, I have 2 younger brothers who are adopted. Without getting into too much of the complication, one of my younger brothers is actually my cousin, and the other one is his half-brother. I don't want to get into too much of the backstory, because that's a complicated bullshit, and, yeah. Well, both my younger brothers were in and out of foster care when they were younger, for reasons we won't get into, because I don't want to talk about my quote-unquote... Well, I don't want to talk about my dad's brother or his wife. Notice the words I'm not using there.
Yeah.
Well, they were in and out of foster care for when they were young. The younger of the 2 was 2 when he came to be with my family as a foster kid. So, keep in mind that we had them move in with us when the younger one was 2. The older one was 4. So that's pretty young.
Yeah.
They still both have issues, but we can get to that. Ultimately, what happened is my parents went up to the judge and told them that, well, you know, until the parents get back on their feet, these kids have family they can come live with. We'd be happy to take care of them. Judge effectively told them the only way you're getting these kids are if you adopt them. They were basically taken away, and they were wards of the state at that point. So what do my parents do? They go ahead and become foster parents so that the 2 youngins can move in.
Mm.
And they did. I shared my room with my 2 younger brothers for a while. And that was because at the time we were in a 3-bed, 2-bath house. So my parents had their master bedroom, and my sister got to keep her own room. But I shared my room with my 2 younger brothers, which, you know, at the time it wasn't a big deal. Even now it's not that big of a deal. The most annoying part was I had to be quiet when I went to bed, and I had absolutely no room to myself in that house at that point.
Yeah.
Which really did suck. But it was what it was. Beyond that, it wasn't too bad, but we started learning things about the foster care system. My younger brothers would always this was while they were still foster kids, but we all knew what was going to end up happening. They were going to be adopted, and I don't even remember when we started calling them our younger brothers. But it wasn't. It happened pretty quickly. But they did stuff like hide toys underneath their pillows because they wanted to make sure they were there when they woke up. That's not something that normal kids do, but apparently that's something that's fairly common in the foster care system. You don't want other kids to get the toys that are your favorite, so you take them to bed with you.
Yeah, I have something I can add to that too from my experiences, but I don't want to cut you off.
Go ahead.
For the brief time that I actually spent in a foster care facility, I had brought. They allowed me to bring like a suitcase full of stuff, like clothes and toys or whatever. And I had this one Ninja Turtle action figure. That was like my favorite action figure. So like I always brought it with me no matter where I went on my weekend visitation with my parents. Like if we went to the diner, I had this thing on the table with me at the restaurant. So I brought it with me. And within 2 days, someone had stolen it. So I found the kid that took it, and he had it next to, like, so we slept in like a dormitory. It's not like, again, like we had mentioned before the show, Rimshee, that like I don't like to use the term orphanage because then people get this like idea of like this big empty building with like one giant open air room with a bunch of beds in it, and that's all the kids. Like it's not like that. It's foster care facilities, at least back in the 80s when I was in them. It's like being at the hospital, but you're not injured or sick. You get like a room, and there's like 3 or 4 kids to a room, and so like a room that was like a couple doors down from me, I looked in the doorway. And I saw it sitting on this kid's like little nightstand next to his bed. And I just went in and took it. And he threw a fit. And then I, like, you know, obviously, like, the staff had to come in and they had to break up the fight. And I was screaming and yelling that it was mine. You know, like, I've had this for years. It's my favorite toy. You know, don't take it away from me. I didn't understand the concept of, like, a safety blanket. Like, this thing feels like home, so you bring it everywhere. But that's what it was to me. And I'm not saying that this is indicative of what all foster care workers are like, but this was my experience. I'm just speaking from my experience. This motherfucker took it, brought it into the community playroom, threw it into the toy chest with all the other toys that were just like the property of the facility, and was like, if I catch either one of you playing with that for the rest of the day, you're both getting like timeout and you're gonna write essays or whatever. Like, how fucked is that?
I mean, I don't think they ever spent time in an actual facility, but they were going between foster houses. I know that much, and that wouldn't surprise me if it was like that.
Yeah, because like I don't remember if I saw people hiding stuff under their pillows or under their mattress or anything like that, but I can definitely see that being a thing if you spend enough time in one of these facilities. Like, if you've been there for months or years, you're like, this is the one toy that makes me happy, so every night I'm going to sneak it into my room and hide it underneath my blanket or something, so no one else can get it. Like, I can see that being a thing, and then, like, once you get adopted out and you're in a home, it's just a hard habit to break. So you just do it because you don't know any better. Or, like, you genuinely think that that's the way it works. That, like, oh, I'm in this other family with other kids. These other kids are going to take all my toys. It's like, well, no, they have their own toys and you have your toys. But you don't understand that as a kid that didn't grow up with siblings. You know, you don't know what. I don't really know what that dynamic is.
Yeah, I could tell you the annoyances I had with them. They'd always steal my Legos. They'd have their own, but they'd always steal mine out of the big old bin of Legos I used to have. Hell, I still think I have it. I think it's still at my parents' house, and I would love to get that to a place where I could actually store it and pull it out every once in a while and just randomly build stuff. But
I want to stop you for a second, Rimshee, and just make a correction. The plural of Lego is Lego.
Shut up.
Sorry, I'm trying to find levity where I.
But they'd always steal my little Legos, and it would frustrate me because, like, that was the one thing that I had that was just like it's my equivalent of the of your Ninja Turtle.
Yeah.
But but I didn't grow up in a situation where I felt the need to keep it from people.
Yeah.
And they're constantly taking that shit. My parents would constantly be like, "Hey, stop doing that. Ask first." Because, like, if they wanted to play with my Legos, cool. Just don't mix them up and make sure you put them back. I had a massive collection. They could have used them, no problem. But yeah, they'd be hiding they'd be hiding their toys under their pillow to make sure that they still had them. And you know, that could be more than just the foster care system. That could also be because of the bullshit that they went through with their sperm and egg donor.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. It's not necessarily just from the foster care system. But they also ended up with severe detachment disorder. One of them is still experiencing detachment disorder from what we can tell. We thought the other one was experiencing detachment disorder pretty severely as well until we realized, no, he's autistic.
Yeah, for those in the chat that don't know, why don't we tell them what that means?
Okay, go. Yeah, you wanted to, or?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm actually preparing for the next part.
All right, I'd have to look it up because I don't know it offhand.
Alright, so it's basically, you feel... You don't...
I'm looking it up right now.
Well, I'm trying to explain it in a way that doesn't... Like, I'm looking at the definition now, and it almost looks like...
In psychology, it's basically the inability to connect to others on an emotional level, as well as a means of coping with anxiety by avoiding certain situations that trigger it.
Yeah. I guess the best way to, like, explain it on a way that people can maybe relate to is with an example. For me, my detachment disorder happened in the way that I would have my week, like, even like 4 or 5 years into these, like, every weekend I'd spend the whole weekend with my parents and my siblings. Because after I was taken away, my parents went on to have 3 more kids. And even though they had their shit together and CPS wasn't trying to take them away from them, there was still this ongoing legal battle for me. But that's getting away from my point. My point was, my detachment disorder showed itself and I would come over on the weekends, and my brothers or my sister would be like watching like a cartoon that I like, and I would be standing in the doorway of the living room watching it from like the kitchen, and they'd be like, why don't you come in and sit down and watch it with us, like, you like this show, right? And the second they would acknowledge me, I would just walk away, because that's something that I would do when I'm at home with my grandmother. And it was one of the things that kept my mind away from all this shit. And here I am experiencing it in this house where I feel like an outsider with these people that are allegedly my family, I guess. But I don't know what that means. So whenever my siblings would be like, oh, like, what kind of toys do you like to play with? What kind of video games do you like? They would try to relate to me and try to have me do fun things that I like to do with them. And I would just be like, I can't, it feels weird. This doesn't feel right. You know, like, I don't like it. And I would just start crying and want to go home. For like a young kid to be feeling that, it's just,
Yeah. This is shit that young children shouldn't have to put up with. They should be growing up and learning.
yeah, I mean, like, this is to put it in perspective, when, like, most kids, and I say most kids loosely because, you know, the assumed norm is that the parents stay together, the kids grow up with the parents from birth until they're old enough to move out or whatever. During the years where, like, you're supposed to be learning how to walk, your parents are teaching you how to speak, they're teaching you about manners, how to feed yourself, how to dress yourself, like, potty training you. While all this is going on, I'm not getting that from my parents. I'm getting that from my grandmother. And, like, to me, mom and dad are the enemy. Mom and dad are evil people that are trying to take you away. And I'm like, well, then if they're evil and they're trying to take me away, how come I have to go stay with them every weekend? Oh, well, that's because there's this bad guy called the judge, and the judge doesn't like me, so he's punishing me by sending you to be with them. And like,
That's really fucked up.
That sounds like fucking child abuse.
Yeah, like, when most kids are learning how to make friends and, like, making friends and having their friends come over to their house and meeting their parents and playing Nintendo with their friends, I'm fighting my family while not knowing what family means. So, on the subject of not knowing what traditional family is, I want to talk about my godfather, because I mentioned that during this time, I'm living with my grandmother and father. They were roommates. My godfather, bless his soul, was an amazing person. He's a wonderful man, and from what my parents tell me of him, he was their, like, mole for, like, legal stuff. My godfather looked at what my grandmother was doing. They were best friends. My godfather and my grandmother. That's why they lived together. They weren't married. They were just best friends that were retired and living together. My godfather was not a legal guardian. He was just a roommate of my grandmother. But he saw that what she was doing was wrong, so he would feed inside information to my parents. When my grandmother got caught wind of this, she began turning me against him. And it's another one of the things about this story that I've never been able to forgive myself for. because, and I'm going to get into why exactly. My parents forgave me for all the horrible lies I said about them in court. My godfather didn't because he couldn't. So growing up, he was like my father figure. Because I got to see him every day, and he was teaching me stuff about like being a man, and he would take me fishing, camping, play catch with me, taught me how to ride a bike. He was kind of my best friend early on. And eventually my grandmother started fighting with him, and then she found out what he was doing. Sorry. So they would get into screaming matches, and because I wanted so bad to make my grandmother and do everything my grandmother wanted me to do, because she was like my mommy. I was a little kid, and she was like my mom. I wanted love, and I wanted to make her happy, make her proud of me. So I learned from her, and I would parrot her behavior. So I would be watching cartoons, and they would start having a fight about something. I have no idea what they're fighting about. I'm not involved in any way. And from the living room while watching Ninja Turtles or something, I would just shout, "Shut up, Poppy John, you're wrong." You know, and like he would look at me like, you know, with this dumbfounded look on his face, like, what? And so this went on until I was about 7, and then so we had this morning routine. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping all over the place. We had this morning routine where I would wake up in the morning, like my alarm would go off. I would wake up, I would go walk out into the kitchen, press the button on the coffee maker to turn the coffee maker on. Then I would walk back, and on the way down the hallway, I would knock on my godfather's door. I called him Poppy John. His name was John F. Sikelski, of Poughkeepsie, New York. He was a Vietnam field nurse, and he was a volunteer firefighter for 35 years. He is all that is an American man. He was an amazing, loving man, and I treated him like garbage until the day he died. On my way back from the kitchen, I would knock on his door, and I would shout into his room, "Poppy John, coffee's on." And then I would go into the bathroom and do my morning routine, brush my teeth, go to the bathroom, take a quick shower, get dressed for school. I went to a Catholic school, and I learned, like, from what my friends told me, it was weird that at this point I was already dressing myself and showering and stuff in the morning at like 7 years old. I guess, but I don't know. Like when you go to a Catholic academy, there's like an expectation for you to grow up quicker. I guess I don't know. But anyway, I got out of the bathroom.
That weird. I was doing that.
Yeah. I got out of the bathroom. 7. Okay. Maybe I don't know. But again, like I don't really have that experience of knowing because I didn't grow up in a traditional family. So I got done with my bathroom routine, and I went into my room to get dressed for school. And by this point, Nanny, my grandmother, was getting out of bed and was like, "I don't hear John up. Go knock on his door again and see if he's awake." So I did, and I didn't get an answer. So I go back to my grandmother, and I go, he's not answering me. She goes, "Well, open the door and just shake him, and he'll wake up." Well, I open the door, and he's laying face down on the floor in his underwear. His head is surrounded by a pool of blood, and his 2 front teeth are knocked out. And what had happened was, in the middle of the night, he had a heart attack and collapsed and busted his face on his bedside table and just died in the middle of the night. and I was 7. And that was my first experience with death. That's why I say like I'll never forgive myself for the way I acted towards him, because I'm sure he probably would have forgiven me now that I'm older, but that never got to happen. So that's a memory that like I'll never be able to bury. That's always been there. Like, he was my best friend. I'm 7 years old, and now he's gone. I learned. I got a crash course right then and there in this is a person that you care deeply about, and you'll never see them again, ever. So that was something. Yeah, and that's relevant because that was a major. I hate to frame it like this, but it was a major breakthrough in the case from my parents' side, because they're like, "Oh, well, John was younger. John was like early 60s. My grandmother was in her late 60s." That kind of reflects on, well, yeah, how much longer does Virginia have before she kills over dead and the kid's sitting at home with a dead body? You know? So that opened up a whole new avenue for my parents to come at my grandmother with. And that actually helped their case out a lot. Unfortunately, yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way, because what had happened was, well, we still aren't convinced that, like, yeah, you're taking care of 3 kids right now, but you're struggling. So if we introduce a 4th child, it's only going to get harder for you. So we're still not convinced. So, I'm actually jumping ahead of another part I want to talk about. Before I get into that, I guess I'll talk about another um milestone, I guess, in my formative years, which was 1 year later. So, unsurprisingly to anybody, losing my best friend at 7 years old and being in the middle of family court and not knowing who I can trust and who actually cares about me. Well, I was convinced that my grandmother was the only person that I could trust. It resulted in me not behaving properly, like in school or out in public. I would lash out and throw fits and be completely unreasonable, and I would be violent. Like, I would throw things and I would hit other kids. At school. Oh, is it better now? Okay, sorry. Um, um, Thank you, by the way, Canuck. I'm just stopping to read chat now, and thank you, Canuck, for your words about my godfather. I appreciate that. I'm sure that's the way you felt too, but like, it's hard to let yourself off the hook for that, you know. But yeah, so yeah, I was acting up. I was acting up and acting out, and you know, what was anyone who's a child of the '80s and the early '90s? What was like one of the big fads in parenting back then? Do any of you remember? No, it was the next best thing. It was this wonder drug that started with the letter R. Ritalin.
Ah, Ritalin.
Yeah, I was one of the. Yeah, I was one of many kids that were misdiagnosed with ADHD. I did not have ADHD. I had manic dissociative disorder. I had, like the early signs of manic depression. I had violent mood swings because I didn't know how to act. I didn't get like a nurturing upbringing. I was just in the middle of a cold war between my fucking parents and my grandmother. So yeah, this segues into my next milestone in life, which was the overdose. So I was 8 years old, and the court proceedings had gotten to a point where my parents were given 3 months, my final month of school and both months of summer, of custody every year. So they would get every weekend, all year long, and then my last month of school and all of summer, I stayed with them. And adjustments had to be made so that they could take care of me, such as my expensive Ritalin prescription that their insurance didn't cover got knocked down to a generic. And there was this experimental new generic, and you can read up on all the kids that this happened to. I wasn't the only one. I was not a special case. There was this new experimental generic that was 1/12 the price of Ritalin, called haloperidol or Haldol, and they put me on it. And it was incredibly sketchy because if you got even like the slightest miscalculation on the dosage, you could kill a kid. Complete renal failure. Yeah, I was supposed to be given a child-sized dosage of 0.05 milligrams per day. The teenage pharmacist fucked it up and filled my prescription for 5.0 milligrams. 0.05 all the way up to 5. I immediately
100 times.
Yeah, I immediately went into complete renal failure. I turned completely yellow. I vomited. I shit myself. I pissed myself. I was like, mucus was coming out of my eyes and my nose. I very nearly died. That was a whole other court case with CVS that settled out of court in the amount of $10.5 thousand, which was put into a bond that I would get when I turned 21, which I eventually did, and that's a not important story that I'm not going to go into. But the fallout of all this was that nobody got custody of me because I couldn't be at home. I spent the better part of a year at St. Francis Hospital in Poughkeepsie. I had machines breathing for me. I had machines processing urine for me. I had a catheter. I was on dialysis for the first 3 months. As a result, to this day, therapists and doctors tell me that I suffered a mild amount of brain damage, which, coupled with the trauma of the experience, very likely caused my anxiety and my mood swings. It's likely why I have suicidal tendencies. It's not just like an emotional thing, it's like a physical imbalance in my brain that was a trickle-down effect of the overdose. So I spent I want to say 10 and a half to 11 months in the hospital. And in that time, from what my parents tell me, that was a period of reflection for both sides. My grandmother and my parents got together and sat down and said, look, this has been for the last 8 years, it's been tit for tat. It's been you versus me. We haven't stopped to think, or at least one side of us hasn't stopped to think about what this is doing to the kid. And they didn't bury the hatchet, but what they did was they called for a meeting in court, and they arranged for the visitation to be much more open. So what happened was, at any time, my parents could come take me, as long as I was okay with it and my grandmother was okay with it.
So
there was no more.
They didn't hang up the hatchet, or they didn't bury the hatchet, but they hung it up on the wall.
Yeah, she was not going to give me up. She was still going to be my primary guardian, but she recognized that she knew this whole time, but she finally admitted to herself that she was ripping a family apart. And this was, in my parents' words, it was the closest thing that she could come to reaching a compromise. Where she got what she wanted, and my parents got as close as she was going to let them have to what they wanted. Skull, to answer your question, my grandmother called empty nest syndrome. She was pushing 70 years old, and she was a mother to a lot of people in both my mother's and my father's families. She was a live-in nanny for most of her young life, so she always mothered kids, and she had a couple children of her own, but she never let go of those maternal instincts, and they became an obsession for her. And when she saw the opportunity to have a young child and raise another child, it got the better of her, and she didn't want to give me back to my parents. That's how this whole thing came to be. She wanted to be a mother again, and she would do anything within her power to make that happen, no matter how evil she looked in the end.
Which so far sounds pretty evil.
Well, I want to make sure I get through this in chronological order, because I've forgiven her, and my parents forgave her, and they had a long talk in her last days about everything she did. And I don't want to jump to that yet, but we're getting pretty close to that. So I got out of the hospital, and about, I don't know, maybe, again, I'm going by the estimates that my parents gave me, because I don't remember much of this, because I slipped into a coma at some point for a couple weeks, which is when the brain damage happened. So and again, I was 8 years old, so my memory of this is not as solid as my parents were. Within half a year of me getting out of the hospital and going home with my grandmother, cancer started taking her. For the entire time I lived with her, she had throat, lung, and mouth cancer, because she smoked like a stovepipe since she was about 13 years old. And it was beginning to interfere with her ability to take care of me. So, this is where I get to the point where I enter the foster care system. Because my grandmother was beginning to show signs that she might not be fit to take care of me anymore because she could barely take care of herself. But the court was not convinced that my parents should have sole custody of me yet. So initially, the judge decided that my dad's sister, my Aunt Lisa, and her husband, who had recently had a child go off to college, would take me in. They had a lot of money. They both worked in aviation. My uncle was a pilot. My aunt worked a radio control tower at Richmore Aviation in I want to say Fishkill, New York. But anyway, they were well-to-do. They had experience as parents, and they were more than happy to take care of me. So that's what happened. They were granted primary custody of me over my grandmother, and my grandmother agreed to this while she went to her chemo and getting like lymph nodes removed and all this other stuff. So I'm about late 8, maybe early 9 years old, and I'm living with my Aunt Lisa and my Uncle Sean. I'm with them for about half a year, and my Uncle Sean has a stroke. He's late 40s, maybe early 50s at this point, and he had a stroke. So he got really lucky as stroke victims go. Yeah, he maintained all of the motor function in his lower body, but he lost. Well, that's not right. He lost all of the functionality of one side of his face. I can't remember which side, and from the elbow down on that corresponding arm. So he could lift his arm, but he could not move his fingers or his hand or bend at the elbow. And one side of his face was completely frozen. And he was a pilot. He was a career pilot. He wasn't retired yet, but he was now. Can't fly like that. So it was devastating to him because his whole life was aviation. And I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, it took a really big toll on him. And it became the kind of situation where my aunt was now taking care of an adult and me. And maybe given more time, it would have evened out. But it was hard for them at first, and I don't look back at them and feel like they kicked me to the curb or anything. But like, I was awake one night when I heard them having a I imagine a very difficult to have discussion, where between all, like, even with all their money and their insurance and the medical bills, Sean's physical therapy and the drugs that he had to be on and all that stuff, especially because most of their money came from Sean being a pilot, and now he's retired, and his retirement checks weren't going to cover everything. They were like, look, we might not be able to do this with Addie anymore. And I was awake for that conversation. And I vividly remember them talking about a friend that they had in the foster care system that would take really good care of me and would make sure that nothing bad happened to me. And sure enough, 2 days later, that friend came to visit and was like, "Hi, Addie, my name's Michelle, blah, 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 blah. You're going to come stay with me for a little while." And, again, more court proceedings. My dad was infuriated that my aunt didn't go to her brother, my dad, first about this. But my aunt's reasoning, from what my mom and dad say, and was probably rightfully so, was that my parents would have been too, for lack of a better term, excited by this news, and would have tried to run with it as like, well, he's got nowhere else better to go. Why move back in with us? And like, he didn't want that to. My aunt didn't want that to reflect poorly on my parents looking like they were opportunistic to the judge. But she probably should have talked it out with them first. But so I went into foster care. Within a week of being there, well, actually no, it was in the first 2 days, where they were like showing me around, and these are your new friends that you're going to be living with for a little while. It's going to be like a big sleepover, you know, and you know, like, this is the playground and this is the courtyard. Don't go past that fence. Blah blah blah. Can't anyway. There's a big lock on it. You know, here's some bikes. You can ride around on the bikes if you like the bikes. And then day 2, we had orientation for all the new kids. Like, they wait until they get a bunch of kids, I guess, and then they have like a big powwow with them. They're like, "Hi, my name's Addie. I come from blah blah blah, whatever." And before you go in, they sit you down with the counselor that's going to run the like group session, and they talk about what you are comfortable talking about. And the first thing that this motherfucker says to me is, "So it's my understanding that your parents aren't around anymore." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "Well, I understand it's hard when your parents pass away." And I'm like, "What? I'm 9 years old, and and this guy, because he was confused, just told me that my parents were dead." So I freaked out and had a whole big episode. That was the thing. That's one of my most memorable experiences from the short stay that I had there. I only stayed for like a couple months. But yeah, that's just a little anecdotal story that I felt was important to include, because it definitely fucked with me for a while. For like a solid 6 or so hours, I thought my parents died in a car accident or something while I was there.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked.
Because the guy had like mixed up my file, or someone told him that my parents weren't around, and he took that as they died. I don't know what happened with that. I just remember that being a thing. So yeah, I never actually got adopted out because I needed too much work. Like, it's kind of like when like the SPCA gets a hold of like dogs from families that don't want them anymore. Like, oh, it got too big, or it's too unruly. I can't take care of it. So I'm gonna drop it off here, and you guys deal with it. That's kind of what my case was. I had too much baggage. I was too fucked in the head to be a good fit for like a family that's looking to adopt yet. So they wanted me to go through all kinds of therapy and stuff before I was a candidate for adoption. So I never actually got adopted out. So I just stayed at this foster care place for like 6 or 7 months. As I said, like 6 or 7 months on, my grandmother's specialists and doctors were like, "Hey, we think we got the cancer. You're all good." She had like one of those like robot hold up to your neck robot voice things, because they took out chunks of her like esophagus and her vocal cords. and all kinds of things. So that was weird going home to that. But yeah, so they were like, yeah, you know, like you're on a steady regimen of like coming to chemo and recovering, and like we think we got it down. If you just come in like once a month for this treatment, you're perfectly well capable of taking care of your grandson, all that stuff. So yeah, I went back to live with Nanny. That was the case for about a year, and the cancer came back really, really, really hard. So I think I got the time frame wrong, because by now I'm 11 years old. When the cancer came back, I was 11. And at this point, the family court system was kind of sick of my family. And they're like, look, his extended family can't take him. His grandmother can't take care of him anymore. This kid has been through the ringer. Let's stop fucking around with this kid. Let's just give him back to his parents. So in the end, my parents won. By default, because my grandmother was goddamn dying.
Sounds like something that shouldn't have taken this long.
Yeah. So by this time, I had such a weird, disconnected, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, not, like, I didn't have what I would call like a nurturing upbringing, really. I got the bare minimum from my grandmother and from counselors and things like that. But I was, as I mentioned in the previous story, like I was really disconnected, and I was checked out most of the time. So my siblings and I did not get along. Each one of my siblings were all 2 years apart. So I'm the oldest. My brother John is 2 years younger than me. Rick is 2 years younger than John, and Lauren is 2 years younger than Rick. They didn't like me because they've dealt with me for like a number of years in like weekend visitation, and I was this weird kid that acted like I didn't like them and didn't want anything to do with them. So they were like, fuck this kid. He doesn't want anything to do with us. We don't want anything to do with him. So, like, we bonded over the years, and we got closer as we got older, but it took a long time. And the main thing to take away from this, in my case, was that I was finally with my family. My mom, my dad, my siblings. We were all in one home, living together. You know, in you know, the like American standard of what a nuclear family is. And it meant nothing to me. I didn't understand it. It was only like when I turned 12, my brother was like I was sitting, we were at the bus stop waiting for the bus, and me and my brother were like 1 grade apart, and so like we ride the same bus to the same school, and we're the only ones that are there without like our parents there. And like I see all the like moms and dads putting their kids on the bus, and I'm like, huh, I thought that's like what it was like on TV. And my brother was like, no, that's normal. What you had wasn't normal. You living with grandma was not normal. You should have been with us. This is normal. And like that's when it clicked that, oh, the like sitcom television family, like Family Matters, Home Improvement, that's real. That's normal.
Or at least as normal as a TV show can be.
Yeah. I thought that was Hollywood bullshit. I thought that was just, like, oh, like this is, like you watch an action movie and you see a car crash into a stop sign and it bursts into flame.
That's
like
one strong stop sign.
it's like you think until someone tells you that cars aren't that volatile, you might believe that that's possible. Like someone shoots the gas tank on a car that's trying to get away and it blows up. You might think that's real. Like I thought that normal families were like that. They were like an idealized kind of fake Hollywood thing. But yeah, I've talked about that enough. But anyway, my grandmother eventually passed from the cancer. I was not around for that. I was not around for her final moments. We had moved to Plattsburgh, which is 4 hours north, because my dad got offered a really good job working at a plant. And my dad thought it was best if I wasn't there to see my grandmother in her final days, because now that I'm older and my parents thought I could handle it, they explained to me that she looked like a mummy. All of her hair was gone. She was a shriveled husk of a human. She was like, my mom was like, remember when you were little in the hospital and you had all these machines that were like doing your breathing for you, and they like processed your food for you and all that stuff? That was your grandmother. We didn't want you to see her like that. We didn't want your final memory of her to be like that. So, before she died, in like one of her last days, unfortunately she died alone. She was in hospice care at her home, and her like the day before she died, she called a meeting with the family, my parents and my aunts and uncles and everyone who was involved in all the court drama, and she apologized. She was like, I'm sorry for everything that I put you guys through, and I'm sorry that I screwed Addie up. And from what my dad says, one of the last things that she heard my mom say was, you gave him a better life than we could have at the time. Sorry.
No, take your time.
You're fine. Yeah.
Yeah, this is obviously an emotional subject.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for telling the story, though.
Yeah.
It's important for people to hear things like this.
Yeah. I've got all these other notes about the ramifications of all the like psychological trauma that I went through and how it carried into my teenage years, but I don't want to keep going on with it. I'm just gonna. I wanted this to be about growing up in the court system, and that's about where my story ends in that regard. Yeah, like just to anyone out there, if you're like a new parent or not a new parent, and like you're in like I don't want to tell you how to live your life, how to raise your kids, but if like you and your significant other are not seeing eye to eye and you're thinking of a divorce or whatever, I'm not saying don't get a divorce, but and if you're a fan of the show and you're a fan of the Saints and you're part of the Discord, I'm gonna presume that you're a good person that thinks about these kind of things, but just really think about what you're gonna put the kid through. Really think. Do not use children as leverage.
Yeah, that's an asshole move.
Do not put kids through undue stress. Even if you're gonna split up, no matter what's gonna happen, I'm not gonna tell you to stay together for the kid's sake, but just when it comes to what you're gonna do about your children, really think about what's gonna be best for them. Because I'm a living testament of how bad it can fuck a person up. And with that, just thanks for hearing me out.
Well, I mean, we can go into some I mean, you obviously didn't age out of the foster care system, so you had that benefit. But like, I had an ex who aged out of the foster care system, and she definitely has some issues. I haven't spoken to her in fucking years. But I mean, we can go over some statistics, like, because I mean, we didn't really look at these, but but Jabel's pulled up foster care child trends, so we can look at this. So yeah, number and rate of children in foster care ages 17 and younger, 1990 to 2017. So let's see. This is I'm trying to figure out what exactly this means, but Jables, did you read through this before you posted
it? Briefly, yeah.
Okay, you wanna talk about this a little bit?
It's just showing trends of the number of kids that are in foster care between 1990 and 2017. All it's showing is the trends. Luckily, we've been on a downswing. Well, we've been kind of on an upswing since 2014, but it's been significantly lower since the 90s and early 2000s, which is good. One thing I want to recommend is maybe find a good charity. I was looking for one before the show, but I didn't have time to look into how their money is actually spent. I'll be looking for more stuff to post, which I'll add to the description on the YouTube video, so be sure to check back in over the next week on there.
Well, actually, it'll be uploaded as soon as we have that information.
Yeah, but I'll hop back in and I'll add to the description later.
Okay.
Yeah. Just want to say thanks, Addie, for telling your story. It's very important. People hear things like that, especially if somebody's going through the same things. It's important to know that they're not the only person that had to go through it.
Yeah, I'll include this in the description as well, this specific article, if you want to read through it. We also have 51 useful aging out foster care statistics, which I'm not going to go ahead and read through, but actually, you know what? Why don't we go and read through this real quick?
I can't even imagine what it must be like for those kids. Like, your entire youth is spent with people who's, like, I'm sure that there are foster care workers. I'm not throwing shade at the people that work in the system. The system as a whole, like most systems in America, is very broken and doesn't put the subject of the system first. But I can't imagine what it must be like growing up your entire childhood raised by people whose job it is to take care of you. They're not doing it because they're your parents and they love you. They're doing it because it is their job to do it. And when you get older and you realize that that was the case, I can't imagine how empty that must feel. And how, like, spending your whole life growing up thinking nobody wanted you. And you had to go all the way you had to see it all the way to the end until you were too old that you couldn't stick around anymore and you just got kicked out. You know, it's like even the system doesn't want you anymore. Bye, you're too old. Jesus Christ. Sorry, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and read through some of these. This is as of 2017, so keep that in mind. But more than 250,000 children are placed in foster care systems in the United States every year. We are making some promises to these children when we place them into foster care. We are telling them that they are getting the chance to create a better life for themselves. They are promised a safe home where they can have a family that can be called their own. For many children, these promises are just empty words that have no meaning. And statistics show many foster kids are aging out of the system and have nowhere to turn. More than 23,000 children will age out of the U.S. foster care system every year. After reaching the age of 18, 20% of the children who were in foster care will become instantly homeless. Only 1 out of every 2 foster kids, so 50% of all foster kids who age out of the system will have some form of gainful employment by the age of 24. There is less than a 3% chance of for children who have aged out of foster care to earn a college degree at any point in their life. 7 out of 10 girls who age out of the foster care system will become pregnant before the age of 21. The percentage of children who age out of the foster care system and still suffer from the direct effects of PTSD is 25%. Tens of thousands of children in the foster care system will take away from their parents were taken away from their parents after extreme abuse. 8% of total child population of the United States is represented by reports of abuse that are given to authorities in the United States annually. In 2015, more than 20,000 young people whom states failed to reunite with their families are placed in permanent homes. That's just some fucked statistics right there. Like, I know people. My younger brothers. I know at least one of them suffers from PTSD. They didn't age out. They obviously were adopted by my parents, but suffered from PTSD. One of them not because of the foster care system, but because he's autistic, isn't going to get a college degree. He's high social, low cognitive, so that's not going to help him. I mean, these statistics are pretty fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've also.
It's one of those situations that people don't think about a lot, and once you start digging in, then it's just horrifying.
It's pretty fucked. Like, I mean, is violence against children? Whoa, I'm echoing through you, Eddie.
Oh shit! I've not done anything different.
I don't know what happened, but suddenly I'm echoing.
Has that fixed it?
I don't know. Nope.
Hold on.
Yeah. I'm gonna go. Oh well, it's not
better now.
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay.
But they have statistics on violence against children. Is it a hidden epidemic? Which is something to consider, too. Because while yours wasn't necessarily physical violence...
Yeah, I was never physically abused. Like, I grew up in the 80s and 90s when it was still kind of acceptable for you to, like, spank your kids with a belt. But, like, and like, in my older years, when I was living with my parents, my dad and I got in fist fights. So we consider that more like a... 2 men dealing with a situation. But no, yeah, like I never was beaten or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, just it's still there was still emotional abuse there, and that's definitely something to consider. But violence. In the U.S., 397,122 children are living without permanent families in the foster care system. That's sad, and this is something where I completely understand people being like, I don't want to have kids when there's so many kids that need adoption. The issue is most of the people who say that go outside of the United States to adopt when there's that many kids in the U.S. alone that need families.
Yeah.
The number of these foster kids who are eligible for adoption, on average, every year is 101,666. So, maybe not even a third. A little over a quarter, not even a third. That's... What the fuck?
Yeah, like, I consider myself really lucky for the experience that I had. It's not fortunate that my whole experience happened to me, but like my brush with the foster care system was so slight and there were circumstances that, like, I don't want to word them like this because it involves people approaching their deathbed, but like the circumstances that fell into place that got me in and out of the foster care system so quickly, I got really lucky. I got really, really lucky.
It could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But it was still pretty shitty overall.
Yeah. 32% of children who are eligible for adoption from foster care must wait at least 3 years before they will be adopted. Now,
yeah, our adoption system's kind of fucked.
I think that is... I think that one actually is played a role in my parents adopting my younger brothers.
I think that's...
Because
I think that's a role. I think it's easier if you're family members.
Yeah, but at the same time, this was a different situation, I'm sure, because it was kind of crazy. But I think we waited about 3 years before they were actually adopted. I know that they were officially adopted before September 11th, 2001. And the reason I know that is because, you know what, it may have been 2 years, but the reason that I know that that's roughly the time they were adopted was because my parents were talking to the courts, hey, we're moving to a new house. Come just a little bit after September 11th, and the foster care system was like, oh, we haven't vetted it. Oh, yeah, we better rush on that adoption then, shouldn't we? Because we're moving.
Yeah. Jesus Christ.
Like, they had approved the house that we were living in, which was I miss that house sometimes, but I've been back since, and it just seems so small by comparison. Because we went from a 3-bed, 2-bath to a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, technically a 5-bed, 3-bath, but one of the bedrooms got turned into my mom's at-home office.
Yeah. My grandmother, for the whole time I lived with her, she bought a trailer in like a really nice, like, retirement community kind of trailer park. And when I mean like retirement, like, imagine a trailer park that's like a gated community full of white people, like rich white people. That's what, like, imagine if the 1% built a trailer park. like it was an amazing, cool place to live because, like, it had like a community center and all that. But like all the homes were fucking trailers, but they weren't just a trailer. They were like a trailer that was parked there and then had like a mansion built off of it. So like the trailer I grew up in was like a double wide that had like a half second story where like you went up like a half a flight of stairs, and then that was where like the living room was and all that kind of stuff. And it had like a concrete patio out front and like a whole backyard play area with a chain link fence around it. Like it was a pretty nice place to grow up. But, you know, growing up in a nice place isn't the same as growing up with your fucking family like you should. But, yeah.
Well, let's... There are 17,900,000 orphans who have lost both parents and are living in orphanages or on the streets around the world today. That's pretty... Yeah. U.S. families adopted more than 7,000 children in 2012, yet over 100,000 children await adoption from the American foster care system every year. So, yeah. That's not even a dent.
Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's U.S. families adopting children, period. That's not even in the U.S. From the U.S. So that's 7,000 children from around the world, ignoring those that are here. Like, I'm not trying to make an argument of take care of the home front first or anything like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what the fuck? That's a huge number. We have a lot here,
Well,
and people. Usually, the reason people are adopting from another country is
it's easier.
well, one, it's easier, or two, oh, we're gonna give them a better life in America because America provides a better life for people, and yet and those who have that latter argument are basically saying, oh, fucking kids in America, they're not worth the American dream. They're already here. The foster care system will take care of them. No, it won't.
I want to really quick before we move to the next point or say any more on this. If you guys are down, I would love to do a whole nother stream where we talk about that, because I've had hours-long discussions with some of my friends that grew up, not like in foster care, but like grew up and became child psychologists, and they deal with kids that are in foster care, or, you know, like, I've got one friend that's a lawyer now that has dealt with like family, like custody battles and things like that. And they talk about these, like, we've had like really lengthy discussions about these celebrities that treat foreign orphans like a fucking chihuahua that they carry around in their purse. It's like their new trendy thing to like post about on social media. Oh,
it's a disgusting virtue signal.
Yeah. It's like
I adopted a kid from Chile. Look at this. I'm so progressive. I'm so beneficial to the world. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, go fuck yourself.
Meanwhile, their Instagram and their Facebook is like, and like their Twitter is full of selfies of them like at the park with the kid, or like getting ice cream with the kid, or buying the kid school clothes.
Have you guys noticed my kid is brown yet?
But behind the scenes, they never look at the fucking kid. There's like they've got like a nanny that takes care of the kid 24/7, and they drag the kid out on play dates so they can get some fucking pictures for their fucking like Instagram, and then they throw the kid back at the fucking like caretakers, and they go on to their fucking parties
it's
and
that
their
mommy
red
blogger
carpet
club.
shit. Yeah, I was really critical of Angelina Jolie for a long time. I did a lot of research on Angelina Jolie because I was like, this fucking bitch. But no, she's hashtag one of the good ones.
I was gonna ask if you knew anything about her. I didn't know enough about her.
Her and Brad genuinely give a shit about those kids that they adopt.
Fair enough. Can't fault them for that.
No shade at them. No shade at them.
Good on them. At least there's someone out there with the money to spend on foster kids.
Yeah, like if you guys want to make this like a blip for like one of the pre-shows, or like if you want to do a separate stream about this kind of thing, I could go on for hours about this.
Yeah, we could do a separate show on this at some point. Hell, technically we could go as long as we want on this. We don't have a time constraint. I just don't know that would be the best idea.
I would be willing, but I'm a little emotionally drained at the moment.
No, I get it. And
anyway. I don't want this, like, I'm sure there's people in here that do have other shit they want to do today.
Yeah, I gotta go over to my parents' house later to do laundry and have my mom make me a birthday pumpkin pie.
Oh, well, happy goddamn birthday.
It's tomorrow, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, we'll do another stream like this. If you could get some of those friends involved.
Yeah, we happily
have maybe.
That'd be cool.
Yeah,
And by then I should be able to find some charities, so we'll make it a charity stream too.
Yeah.
The only problem I might have with my one friend, Heather, who is she is a caseworker for like the family court system,
is she can't speak about the cases.
NDAs, yeah. Like she can talk to me behind the scenes because I'm not broadcasting it to the internet. So I'll talk with her and see if it's something that we can do. But I'm
sure there's plenty of broad situations that they can talk about.
Yeah, she can.
She doesn't have to be specific on anything. Yeah. We won't push. We wouldn't push for anything.
Yeah. That's That's even if she wants to do it. But I will definitely talk to her.
Anyway, let's keep going on these points, and we'll get through this, and once we get through this, we'll call it good. Nearly 60% of young men who age out of the foster care system and are legally emancipated have been convicted of a crime. Over half. Oh, I could make a joke there about they're in the system, and now that they're out of the system, they want back in, kind of thing, but it's too easy, and it's probably more true than we want it to be.
Like, the sad reality of things like that is that it goes in two directions sometimes. From, like, the stuff that I've seen, there's two reasons that happens. One is, the kid... I know it's like a tired old boomer trope, but I can speak from experience that there's truth in it. Not that it's flat out gospel, but that there's truth in it. That when kids don't have a solid, grounded upbringing, they become a fucking nightmare to society. They become drunken vagrants, or car thieves, or burglars, or rapists, or murderers, or just in general sociopaths and psychopaths. Not all the time, but there is some truth in that. And what you find out, like, when you look into these cases and you see like the minutes from like the sentencing and stuff of like this kid that grew up and like killed a family of 4, or like whatever, and like they grew up in the system.
Well, not whatever as in, oh, whatever, they just killed a whatever happened. To be clear, for anyone trying to...
Yeah, I throw around the term whatever a lot. I'm sorry. I'm a child of the 90s. Whatever and dude and gnarly and rad are all part of my my vernacular, and they always will be.
Yeah, it's hella hard to slip out of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, see, the hella nice drop of the hella there. But anyway, to stay on point, you find out that some of them did make something of themselves. Like, the guy that went on to kill, like, I'm not going to name names, I'm not going to cite an exact case, but, like, let's just say, for example, I'll make one up. The guy that goes off and in his 30s just breaks into a home and murders a whole family, and then just sits there, calls the cops on himself, and sits there and waits for the cops to come arrest him, and then just peacefully gives up. That dude, more often than not, had a successful life. Like, he went on, like, he like took all that anger and all that abandonment, and he focused it into going to college, and like getting into like a career where he worked in an office and he worked his way up the corporate ladder and all this. But with all of his, like, what we would consider like middling success, like, he's not a millionaire, he doesn't have a Ferrari or a mansion.
He's successful.
Or like a beautiful
but...
He's successful. He's met the bare minimum requirements for what a lot of us would consider is a successful life. But it's all shallow and pointless to him, because he's like, I don't have anyone to share it with. None of this, like, I'm just going through the motions. This doesn't mean anything to me. So what's familiar to him are 4 concrete walls and a government-issued bed inside a facility surrounded by people that were hired to take care of him. Because the concept of loved ones, of like even making his own family, like finding a wife, raising his own kids,
foreign to him.
It's so foreign that he's like, I wouldn't even know how to be a good dad. I wouldn't know how to be a good wife, because I didn't grow up with a loving dad or a loving mom. I don't know what it's like to have real siblings. I grew up with other kids in the system, but we weren't brothers, as much as the system tried to tell us we were. That like we were like brothers and we should treat each other like brothers and sisters. I don't even know what that means. What is a brother? So they go, fuck it. I want the fast track into the life that I knew I had. into the life that I knew, the life that I remember. And if I just like commit like felony larceny, I'll be out in a couple years. No, I need to make sure that I'm in it for the long haul. So I'm going to find that perfect family that I never got to have. And all these years of angst and anger and jealousy and rage that I didn't get to have that. And that I had to have such a fucked up life while all these other kids got to grow up with their loving families and their birthday parties and, you know, going to Pizza Hut when they got straight A's and being on the baseball team and all this other stuff. All that shit I didn't get to have. I want to come in, like, excuse the bad lyric reference, I don't mean it, but I'm gonna be a wrecking ball into that fucking life and just destroy it. Just fucking destroy it. And in the moment, it's gonna feel fucking great. And then while I'm living out the rest of my life, either on death row or in maximum security prison or some kind of psych ward locked up for the rest of my days, I can deal with the moral fallout and how I'm going to feel about having done that later. I just want to feel familiar. I want that familiarity back. I want to be back in the system. That's genuinely a motivating factor for how some of that shit happens. It happens more often than you think it would. And that's the sad reality about these kids that are in the system right now, is that any one of them is a ticking time bomb waiting for that to happen to them. I talk all the time about how I can't stand kids. Kids piss me off because they don't understand what's proper etiquette and how to talk to somebody, and they commit all these social faux pas that piss me off because they're kids. They don't know better. I don't like hanging around kids. But kids need our help. Because a lot of times their parents aren't there to help them. The system is there to help them, but it doesn't.
It's there to help them, but it fails at it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that's really all I've got to add to it.
This next one actually pisses me off a fair bit. About 1 in 4 kids who age out of the system will not graduate from high school or be able to pass their GED. In other words, kids who age out of the system, a quarter of them are failed by the system. That it's the government's job to make sure that these kids in their system, in their care, are taken care of. Part of that is generally going to school, graduating school so that they can get a normal job. The government doesn't care enough to try and do that.
Which, poor education leads to poverty, poverty breeds crime, so on and so forth, continues this.
Yeah, it just continues a horrendous cycle. This is one of the reasons why I'm not a fan of big government. Like, slight skew into politics slightly. I'm not a fan of big government because it doesn't do its job properly.
Too much red tape a lot of the time. That's what happens.
It's bureaucracy.
It's more bureaucracy.
Yeah, we're gonna make this job to make sure that this is taken care of, and they're gonna have the leeway to do this, that, and the other thing. The person we're gonna put into that job doesn't want to do all the work themselves, so they're gonna hire people to do the work, and those people, some of them are gonna suggest hiring other people to do these other specific jobs that the other person hadn't thought of, and it's just gonna balloon like that for a while.
And each one requires a different stack of papers for each step down the ladder. And it goes all the way. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty much done here.
Yeah, I'll finish up these last 2 points. There's one more set for foster kids aren't always placed in foster homes, but, these links will be included in the description of the YouTube video. I'm gonna go ahead and finish reading these two. Despite all of the challenges, 70% of foster kids regularly say that they would like to attend college one day. So, let's see. Where was that other thing about going to college? Less than 3%. So, 70% of the kids that end up in the foster care system say they want to go to college someday. Where was that? Oh, I went too far down. Yeah. Despite all the challenges, 70% of foster kids. Now, to be fair, that's all foster kids, not just those who age out. But still, 3% successful compared to 70% desired. Even if that is extremely skewed, that is extremely skewed to a point where, let's assume that only that the 30% is of kids who age out. Probably still a disparity of something like 3 to 20% at the minimum, and I'm guessing that's still fucked. That's a fucked ratio. 5.1% of children who have been the victim of substantiated child abuse will become the victim of abuse again within 6 months.
Like, it's like, you think about how often, like, I don't want to be problematic and say like regular kids, but like kids that have the like nuclear family upbringing with like nurturing parents and all that, and going to like a semi-okay school or whatever, you look at the rates of how often they either flunk out or drop out or become disenfranchised and just say fuck it and just enter the workforce at a young age and then never really get a career or any kind of meaningful work throughout their life. And then you look at these kids and you think, oh, they don't have a fucking chance. It's just totally fucking bleak. And so much of, like, it was one of the things that I was talking about during, like, the Democratic debates. Like, if you guys were there when we were watching it on the main show live one night, no one, like, people, I think, like, 2 people mentioned kids as a quick talking point, but didn't elaborate on it. And when they did, they were just talking about schools. Like, this is why I keep saying, like, I don't want to vote. Because all the shit I hear is the same regurgitated talking points about we're going to bring the troops home, everyone's going to have this bare minimum income, everyone's going to this. No one talks about, well, we're going to look into the foster care system. We're going to look into families being torn apart by the process of divorce. We're going to look into, this and that, to focus on making sure that even though, like, they say our children, like all children, are like on the same level of like the amount of attention they need and the amount of help they need. They don't talk specifically about the kids that fall between the cracks.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't give a fuck about any of our candidates right now.
None of the Democrats, at least.
Yeah,
because no one I haven't looked at other parties yet. Well, we already know that Trump is going to be the nominee for the Republicans. Chances are it'll be either a senile Biden or a... Because they're going to cheat Bernie again. It'll be either senile Bernie or Lion Elizabeth. And I don't see anyone in that currently could potentially become president caring about these kids enough to actually make an effort to fix it. Why? Because it's not a big enough talking point. That's pretty much it.
No.
Brush it under the rug.
Yeah, I'm completely disenfranchised with American politics as it is, because it's all saying the things the public wants you to say so that you can get the most points before election day, and then on election day, none of anything you were talking about fucking matters. You've now been elected, and now it's up to you to fulfill your own private interests or obligations that your donors expect you to fulfill.
And this is partly why we don't get into politics too much on this show. Like, we're delving into it very slightly, and this is like more than we want to go normally.
We're going a little too far into it. Talk to us in private about it. That's always a great time.
Oh yeah, that we'll talk to you in private about it all day long. Like, I do. Well, maybe not all day long, but I'm gonna read this last paragraph in the violent. Hidden American epidemic bit. If 7 out of 10 foster kids say that they want to pursue college, then why are we finding ways to limit them? A college education allows for a number of advantages that can help these kids find happiness, even though their childhood may not have been as fun as some of their peers. These kids want to change their lives, yet a vast majority of them will never even see college. Only 6% of kids who age out of the system will attempt an institution of higher learning, and only 50% of them will be able to graduate with a degree. What is the end result? These kids give up hope, stop caring, and are at higher risk of repeating the cycle of violence with their own children. One day that led to their placement in the foster care, in foster care in the first place. So, I'm not going to say that kids who age out are more likely to have their kids end up in the foster care system because they were in the foster care system, but my assumption would be that it's based on the fact that these kids don't know anything else, and as a result, they treat their kids in such a way that they were treated when they had a family, and it ends up with them being in the same situation where the kid goes to the foster care system. I don't see I don't want to see that happening. I'd like to see less people end up in the foster care system, personally. Hello? Okay.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. I'm trying to form my.
Ward says we need to teach people how to be parents. You know, that's probably not a bad idea.
That's the thing that I wish they would fucking do in high school. Like, I know that like they always had like home ec growing up. Like, at least when I was a kid, we had home economics, which was like how to cook for yourself, how to do your laundry, how to balance a checkbook, how to apply for a job, like stuff like that. But like, we never. I guess it was because they were afraid of planning the idea in your head of having a kid, that they never talked about how to change a diaper, how to balance going to work and being a good parent. You know, it's like.
Well, they don't even. They don't even teach how to do your own taxes. Like they've gotten rid of home ec in most schools. They've gotten rid of shop in most schools.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to go to a school that had it was mandatory that we took a business class that taught us how to do taxes. Yeah. There was a child care and development class that we could take in high school. I had shop classes.
We had home ec in high school, and we had 2 trades. We had metal shop and electronics. So you could learn to be like an electrician and wire up a house or fix your radio, or you could learn how to weld and fabricate with metal. Those were the only 2 trade skills that we had in high school.
I had no trade schools in high school.
Yeah,
I know of very few in California anymore. I think there's only one.
To have shop.
Well, yeah. Well, you lived in rural fuck nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. So most of the kids' jobs were going to be like welders, carpenters, farmers. Yeah.
We have like 3 different trade schools in my hometown that just teach you how to work on cars, because we're just a mechanic mill here. Almost everyone that lives in this town can fix their own car. It's just like you're either taught to by your parents or you go off and do it because it's like one of the main things to do here is just be a mechanic. Fixing tractors or cars or whatever. But yeah. Again, I just want to say thank you guys for letting me. I've never talked at length and like gotten my whole story out to anybody. All of my friends have heard my story from start to finish at one point, but not all in one sitting. To be able to just let it all out, that really helped. That, like, I know it's like corny or whatever, but like a weight was definitely lifted. And to see all the people in chat and to hear you guys say that, like, you're aware and like like some of you know what some of it's like, and I appreciate that. Thank you for. I didn't want this stream to be just about me, but I wanted to use my experience to shed a light on kids like me that fell through the cracks. Oh, well, I didn't fall through the cracks, but like kids like me that get stuck in the middle, you know. And also that there are kids that went through what I went through, but are going through all the stuff I went through times a million. I was one of the lucky ones. I was really lucky. But there's a lot of kids out there that will never get the help that they need.
Yeah.
So thank you for tuning in, and if you're catching this on the VOD, thanks for watching. And if you got kids, hug them. Tell them that you love them.
Please.
Yeah. And never ever use them as leverage against somebody.
Yeah.
That's just a dick move.
Also, be sure to tune in on Friday for our regular scheduled programming.
A little less serious, a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
a lot
these
less serious.
Yeah.
a lot less serious. I think these separate shows where we can be this serious is definitely something that we might do a little more often when we have something to talk about.
Yeah, well,
Like, it's not going to be a guaranteed thing, but we'll definitely let you know on the normal pre-show. Also, different opening and closing screens for this because it's not the pre-show. But we'll figure that all out.
By the way,
Alright,
if
everyone.
you like those, you can thank Brainwash.
Oh, yeah.
Made those for us.
Thank you.
Fucking awesome. Alright, we're going to get out of here. Everyone have a good day.
Bye.